Hi, I'm Kimberly Washburn, Curator of Education at the Florence County Museum. Welcome to May's Family Day at Home. This month, we're making art from recycled materials. And in this activity, we'll be using a basic paper tube, like a toilet paper or paper towel tube, to create a fun fish sculpture. So we're going to be making these fish together. So you're going to need to gather a few things from your Family Day at Home kit. You're going to need your template sheet. You're going to need your piece of white scrap paper, your paper tube, your yellow and orange tempera paints, your black acrylic paint, which is also used for another activity, so make sure that you save this when you're finished, and your tacky glue. You also will need your 2 small cork pieces, your sponge, and you have a Q-tip. Once you have those supplies together, you're going to need to gather a few things from around the house. You will need a pencil and a pair of scissors. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start out by painting all of the things that we need to paint first so that those things have an opportunity to dry while we prepare our other materials. So let's get painting. We need to paint the body and the fins of our fish. So I'm going to start with my paper tube. I'm going to be using my yellow and orange tempera paint and my sponge. Now I've pre-moistened this sponge with a little bit of water and I've wrung it out really good so I don't have any water dripping from it. I'm going to start out by just painting my paper tube, and I'm going to be using the sponge to do my painting today. As you're painting, you can sort of swipe the paint on like you're using a paintbrush, or you can dab it on, or you can do a combination of both, which is what I like to do. So I'm going to start with my orange paint and just kind of swipe it all over my paper tube and get it nice and orange. You may want to cover your work surface with some paper like I've done here to catch any paint drips. The tempera paint generally cleans up easily, so it shouldn't make too big of a mess. When I paint my paper tube, I like to put my hand inside the paper tube. To flip it over to paint the other side, I just flip it and do the same. Paint that bottom part. And once I have this sort of solidly painted orange, I'm going to add some little yellow accents. Now you could do the opposite. You could make yours yellow with orange accents. You could choose to just do orange or just do yellow, or you might want to paint stripes or any kind of pattern that you would like for your fish. I'm doing orange, and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. I'm just going to go ahead and dip my same sponge in the yellow. I haven't washed it or anything. And I'm just going to kind of do some dabs of yellow around my paper tube. I like doing this because I think it adds some good texture that almost looks like fish scales. So it gives great texture to my painting. I'm going to go all around my fish with this. I'm going to set this to the side and allow it to dry. I have one I've already done and has already dried, so I've got this paper tube ready to go. Now, you also are going to be painting your scrap sheet of white paper in the same way. So you want it to kind of match whatever you've done with your fish, because this piece of paper is going to be used to create your fish fins and tail. So you want to do sort of the same thing, the same type of pattern, unless you want your fins and tail to be different than the body of your fish. So in the same way, I just painted some orange on. I'm gonna get my yellow and just dab some texture onto my paint, just like that. And I'll set this aside and let it dry as well. Now, while these are drying, you may want to go ahead and prepare some of your other supplies that we're going to be using. So while your paper tube and your piece of paper are drying, you may want to cut out the 2 fish templates that you're going to need from your template sheet. And I've already done that. I have got my fish tail template and my fish fin template ready to go. So I've cut those. I also want to take my Q-tip and cut it in half because we're going to use half of this for black paint and half of this for glue. So I'm going to just use my scissors and cut my Q-tip in half. If it's tricky to cut, you might need a grown-up to assist you with that. Then I'm going to take my 2 little cork pieces. These are pieces of cork, and these are going to be the eyes of my fish. And I'm just going to prepare the eyes by using some black paint and my Q-tip to place some black circles right on the cork. So I'm just going to use a Q-tip and basically just make a little dot. Just dip your Q-tip in the paint and then dab it onto your cork to make a dot. And if it didn't leave a good print, then you can get a little more paint and do it again, just like that. And now we have 2 little fish eyes. I'm going to set those aside to dry. And once your paper tube and your paper are dry, you are ready to start assembling your fish sculpture. So luckily, I have some here that are already dry, and I'm ready to go. So I'm going to take my fish tail template, and I'm just going to lay it on the paper. You can kind of move it around and find if you see a spot that you really like the way that the paint looks on the paper, and just give that a trace, just like that. I'm going to trace it with my pencil, just using my pencil to trace my template. Now, if you want your fishtail to be a different shape, then feel free to sort of use this as a base and then elaborate if you'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and get my scissors and cut out my fish's tail, cut out around those markings. You could make a bunch of these in different colors and just keep using that template over and over. This paper that we're using is just scrap paper that we had in our drawer here at the museum that was left over from cutting paper for other projects. And so this is a great way to use up scrap paper. You could use junk mail for this because you're going to paint it. Nobody would ever know what it was. So if you had junk mail that was just going to get thrown away, that's a great use or a great way to recycle this. You could also use maybe a cereal box. If you had a cereal box that was getting ready to go in the trash, open that cereal box up, and that cardboard would be great for painting to make something like this. So we have my fishy tail right here. If you want to add some contrast or maybe some texture to your fish, you could do some small cuts in your fish's tail to make his tail a little more feathery. You want that feathery kind of fish tail. I didn't do that on my first example, but that is an option. I'm just using my scissors to make some little cuts. And now I have a little fringy tail on the end. So my fish tail is all ready. And now I need to cut out my fish fins. Now we need 1 left fin and 1 right fin, but you'll notice you only have 1 fin on your template sheet. So here's how we get 2 fins, 1 for the left and 1 for the right. So we need them to be a mirror image of each other. I'm going to fold my painted paper. So here's my paper. I folded it in half. And I'm going to go ahead and trace my fish template right onto the paper. Just trace it out. And I'm going to cut it with my paper folded. So with my paper folded, I'm going to cut out my fish fin, and we'll have 1 right fin and 1 left fin. Because of the way they're folded, these will be a mirror image of each other. All right, and so then we can open them up, and you'll notice 1 right and 1 left, and we have our fish tail. So now let's start putting together our fish. Go ahead and take your paper tube and you can decide which side you want to be the mouth and which side you want to be the tail. If you have a side that's a little bit rougher, so one side that maybe the tube is peeling or it's a little bit messier, that's a better tail end. Keep the cleanest end for your fish's mouth. I'm gonna go ahead and take my tacky glue and my other Q-tip piece. I'm just gonna dip this into the tacky glue. It's really thick stuff. And I'm gonna go all the way around the edge of my paper tube on the inside. So I'm just using my Q-tip and my tacky glue, putting glue all the way around on the inside. So hopefully you can see that. Then I'm gonna take my fish's tail and I'm gonna stick it right inside the tube. Just press it where you want it to go, just like that. And then I'm gonna smash my tube closed by making a little crease. And you may have some glue that kind of oozes out the edge, and that's okay. You can straighten the tail if you notice it's a little bit crooked. Just give that a good mash. And you may have to hold it for a few seconds. Tacky glue dries pretty quickly and it's really sticky, but you may need to hold it for 10 or 15 seconds just so it doesn't pop back open. Make sure you've made a good crease on the sides will help as well. All right, so once we have attached the fish, you'll notice how on this fish, the fish looks a little bit more tapered down by the tail end. So we're gonna make some cuts. We're gonna cut off these little points on either side of the tail. And I'm just gonna kind of come in with my scissors and make a cut just like that. I'm gonna do the same on the other side. You might wanna flip it over if it's easier to see. Try not to cut through your tail, just cut to your tail, not through your tail. And there you go. So there's your fish's body. And we have a tail attached. Now we're ready to add the fins to your fish. Now when we look at our fins, you can see they have a kind of larger curve at the top and then an angled edge coming down. And so you're just gonna decide which one's gonna be right and which one's gonna be left. You can try them out both ways. There's not necessarily a right or wrong. It's whatever you like the look of best. And get your Q-tip. Go ahead and maybe about halfway down your tube. Don't want them to be too close to the mouth because we still need room for its eyes. We're gonna just make a dot of glue and go ahead and stick our fin on. I like to kind of curve it out a little bit. You can curl it out a little so that it's kind of three-dimensional. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side. You can always stick your finger inside the paper tube and give it sort of a pinch like that if it helps. But now I have my two fins attached. I kind of, while the glue's wet, like to look at it from the top and see if they look like they're even. And if not, while the glue's still wet, you can wiggle them around a little. And the last step is to go ahead and attach our eyes. Mine are still a little wet, so I want to be careful. But if yours are all the way dry, then just get your Q-tip with glue, put a dot of glue on the back of that cork, decide where you want his eyes to go, and attach them. The tacky glue that we use to make your fish should be dry within about an hour or so. So let your fish dry for about an hour before you handle it or swim it around too much. But now we have a super cool fish sculpture that was made completely out of recycled materials that are easy to find around the house. I can't wait to see what you've created with the paper tubes.